Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 7th of March 2023. And the following is going to be our topic of discussion during the course of the show. We will begin with the talks that have been held, the two-day talks on counterterrorism that were held from the Pakistan and the US side. The US delegation was here in Islamabad, and these two-day talks concluded today. Cooperation in fight against terrorism, Afghan situation and impact on Pakistan and US responsibilities after the Afghan withdrawal is amongst the different issues that we will be discussing during the course of this segment. Then we will be going towards global progress as far as women's rights is concerned. Now, Antonio Guterres, who was the United Nations Secretary General, says that this progress on women's rights is vanishing before our own eyes. He also talked about, he gave the examples of certain countries including Afghanistan. Why is that happening? What are the basic reasons behind it? Is it COVID? Is it the patriarchy that continues to sustain itself globally? That and more will be discussed during our second segment. Then we'll be talking about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and expatriates of the state of Palestine that has warned of the dangers of the calls launched by extremist Jewish organizations to carry out massive incursions into the holy Masjid al-Aqsa. This is something that is a continuation of the barbarities that has been going on against the Palestinians in Israel, and it seems to be going in a line where nobody wants to stop it in the world. Where is all of this heading? This is our third story. And finally, we'll be talking about more than 12,000 Rohingya Muslim refugees who have been left homeless because of a fire that swept through a camp at Cox's Bazar in southeastern Bangladesh. This has been stated by the United Nations. We also know the Rohingya refugees that were there, and a large number of these refugees were there in the Cox's Bazar, and of course the situation has become quite unbearable after this fire, but they were already in not a normal situation before this fire as well. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the collaboration between the US and Pakistan in different spheres, but this time we'll be emphasizing upon counter-terrorism, two-day talks that were held between the Pakistani and the US sides. More in the following report.
Pakistan is facing a renewed threat of terrorism since US withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021. The threat that insurgency poses to Pakistan was illustrated again as 9 security personnel were martyred and 6 injured in an explosion near a truck of the Balochistan Constabulary in the Bolan district of Balochistan. Pakistan and US are holding a counter-terrorism dialogue in Islamabad, which is aimed at discussing the common threat of terrorism, cooperation at multilateral fora, and countering the financing of terrorism. Two-day dialogue provided an opportunity for both sides to exchange views and share their experiences and best practices in the domain of counter-terrorism. A State Department announcement said last week that the participants in the Islamabad meeting would develop policy-oriented strategies regarding cooperation in critical areas such as border security and countering the financing of terrorism. Earlier in February, the US had reiterated that the security relationship with Pakistan is important and that many of the threats that Islamabad faces could well in turn be threat to us. US-Pakistan counterterrorism cooperation was also emphasized by the US State Department's 2022 Integrated Country Strategy on Pakistan. The Pak-US dialogue on counterterrorism has renewed hopes to bolster security cooperation between two countries in order to jointly combat the scourge of terrorism.
Hassan Khan, who's a journalist, joins us online. Hassan, thank you very much to have joined us. Hassan, these two-day talks that were held between the US side as well as the Pakistani side, there were certain fields that were discussed in detail that include improving cooperation, preventing and counter violent extremism, and combating terrorism financing. How important are these 3 points in the wake of all that both the US and Pakistan are facing in the current months?
As you know, there have been high-level and mid-level dialogues happening between the US and Pakistan in recent months. There have been a flurry of events happening in both Islamabad and Washington. First, we had this defense dialogue last month, and now we have this counterterrorism dialogue. So these two events, these two dialogues are interlinked in the sense that they can help bolster ties in terms of countering terrorism in the region and beyond. Since this region is unfortunately, it's a hub of terrorist activity, especially in Afghanistan, from where different terrorist organizations such as ISKP, TTP, and other terrorist organizations such as the BLA have been operating for the past several years. And this is something which the US and Pakistan can work together on, and even make other regional countries and the international community involved to counter any kind of grave threats originating from this region. So in that term, both sides need to work together in the long run and in the short run in order to contain these kind of threats. And in this context,
Hassan, the US
yeah.
remained in Afghanistan for around 2 decades. Now that it has is no longer associated with Afghanistan, nevertheless, the threats emanate into Pakistan from Afghanistan. How important is the US responsibility towards countering such terrorist threats from Afghanistan that emanate into Pakistan, could emanate into other countries in the region as well?
Well, the US has its limitation to counterterrorism, but it can involve regional partners such as Pakistan itself to work on these issues. And of course, the Afghan interim government needs to be pushed towards this cooperation because they have been consistently refusing to cooperate on such matters. Apart from some rare, cooperation with the US, which happened last year, which resulted in an airstrike against some terrorist groups. But that is not the point. That the point is that the U.S. has limited options in this region. Over the horizon facility cannot, sustain in the long run since there are regional limit. Pakistan cannot allow it in current context, and so Central Asia is also not a feasible option for the U.S. to have over the horizon
But
facility
nevertheless, the
because
US could help Pakistan in the different kinds of technologies that it can provide. It has updated technology as far as countering threats in real time and understanding where such elements are present within Pakistan and of course from the areas when they are trying to enter Pakistani territories. This said, I'd like to understand also the recent interest of the US as far as Pakistan is concerned. We have seen the TIFA Council ministerial meeting that has happened in Washington DC, that happened after a period of 7 years. Then we have the upcoming strategic energy dialogue and climate and environment working group meetings in Pakistan. We have also had two recent high-level interactions, a phone call between the US Secretary of Defense and Pakistan's Chief of the Army Staff, and a visit to Pakistan by the US Central Command Chief. Does all of this suggest that the US has a renewed interest in Pakistan, whether it be counterterrorism, whether it be in other fields?
Yes, of course. The renewed interest is important in the context of countering terrorism, and the U.S. Involvement in to assist Pakistan is quite important in this regard. So I would say that any kind of cooperation in the future depends on these dialogues which are happening in the recent past, especially today and last month. And if you remember, Foreign Minister Bilawal at the Munich Security Conference last month, he said that this region is an alphabet soup. He used the term alphabet soup for all these terrorist groups originating in Afghanistan. So in that context, the foreign minister has rightly pointed out that the Afghan interim government needs to cooperate with both Pakistan and the international community if it wishes to have if it wishes to be a part of the international community, be an inclusive part of the international community, because until now they have been refusing to cooperate on any such matter. They have been, curtailing education for girls. They have been curtailing humanitarian assistance. They are involved in all kinds of activity which could potentially isolate them not far in the future. So for them, it's important to work with the international community, especially Washington, Islamabad, Beijing, and even Moscow. Although Moscow and Washington have their own crisis going on in Eastern Europe
But
in
the
the
fact
context of
remains
the
that
Ukraine
both
conflict.
whether it be Moscow, whether it be Beijing, or whether it be Washington, they all have interest in reducing such terrorist threats that emanate from Afghanistan, because it can not only endanger this region but also beyond. They've seen 9/11 and they've seen the impact that such terrorist threats could have on the world, and this is why this cooperation in counterterrorism is the need of the hour. Hassan, kindly stay on line with me. We've been joined in the studios by Dr. Amina Mehmood. She's a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Saba, thank you very much to have joined us. Today, talks on counterterrorism between the US and Pakistan conclude today. The environment was quite positive. We've also seen a resumption of ties in the field of economy with the TIFA dialogue that was held after a period of 7 years. Is the US-Pakistan collaboration entering a new chapter?
I think it's revival of the previous chapter.
All right.
And obviously, both stakeholders are having convergence of interest on this topic, that counter-terrorism here is inevitable for Pakistan and US both. And US stayed here for 20 years, but after withdrawal, you see the scenario that terrorism is not rising, but coming back with the full-fledged, zeal as it was already in start of 20th century. So 21st century. So I think that there should be there should be revival of dialogue, there should be revival of strategy, there should be discussion again to take the new dynamics into account and then make a new planning to deal with, because that is, as you just mentioned, that is in the interest of the whole world, not Pakistan and US alone, but it is for India, it is for China,
it is for Russia.
And it is for SCO, the whole country's whole membership of SCO, that there should be counter-terrorism strategy adopted as collectively to deal with the situation.
Dr. Amina, there was a recent report that was taken out by the US on the department's, US State Department's 2022 integrated country strategy on Pakistan that shows a clear visibility as far as Pakistan is concerned. Do you feel the US can play an important role to neutralize threats such as the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or the ISIK?
I don't think so. I don't agree with this point, because that actually if US would have been able to deal with that, it could have done earlier. And now Pakistan need cooperation of US, that is in strategy, in material and moral support, but
in the technical support as well.
And technical support. But Pakistan has to deal with this situation because that is purely a regional dynamic. And we can deal with the strength of our own. We a supporter of Pakistan in Taliban and other factions in Afghanistan, and with the Pakhtun population and their on bilateral basis. US presence of US and participation of US would complicate the issue, because if US would enter in this area, certainly Russia would intervene as well. And that again, that would
but
be
the US could help Pakistan achieve its goals, couldn't it? Because it has the technology that is quite updated and could provide, because the Afghan Taliban, the TTP or the Afghan Taliban are also using the same arms that were left by the US when it
actually US did the same as they did last time. It is said in American history that it is the US style, that when they finish some task, they stay for a while and then they see that what is left over, and they treat that and then they go. Even a US plumber would do that. But US government failed to do that. They just left, washed their hands from this region and walked away when they saw that there is Geneva Accord signed and Soviet army was withdrawn. This time they did the same.
All right.
That they withdrew in haste. Leaving every asset, every military asset, every strategic asset in the hands of terrorists, which they claim terrorists.
All right, Dr. Amina, there is another thing altogether. No terrorist organization can work anywhere across the world until it has some kind of financing, whether it comes from different countries, whether it comes from individuals or organizations. But the fact remains that terrorist financing is a very important element that sustains the growth of militancy anywhere in the world. How important is the countering of the grassroots support for terrorist organizations so as to combat this militant threat that emanates from Afghanistan, and how can the US and Pakistan work together as far as identifying the sources that are also providing terror financing?
Omar, it is very clear that what are the sources. Entire Pakistan forces are financing them, and you see the role of India, that how they are financing the terrorists, and they are intruding them through Afghanistan, through Balochistan, and we have been facilitating them for health facilities and education facility and everything, but in the name of patients they are sending terrorists here. You see that standoff last week, that they closed the border, Pakistan also closed the border, then they came on their knees that we are depriving them of health facility in Pakistan.
But they were the ones who closed the Torkham border.
They first closed. They first closed for 3 years. After that,
No, but even recently they closed the program.
last week, and it was not Pakistan. Pakistan was having very valid reason for closing that people coming with the patient, they should have their documentation. What we demand, that is not illegitimate, because without documentation terrorists are exporting to Pakistan. That's why we said. So I think that we know that who are the financiers, and that's why I say that if United States would enter, certainly Russia would enter, because they are still having rivalry.
So what you are saying is that Pakistan needs to do its job, but with help of important
technical support,
yes.
Monetary support, and then strategic support, but not physical support.
All right. Hassan Khan, coming back to you, I hope you're still online. Do you feel that this terror threat that emanates from Afghanistan, is it a regional threat, is it an international threat, or is it a transnational terror threat? How much of a threat do you feel is an organization such as the TEP or the ISIK for the West?
It's a combination of all three, in my opinion, because first it started regional, then transnational, and then beyond, so international in the end. So for now, there's no immediate threat to the US as far as these threats are concerned. But if the interim Afghan government doesn't act sooner than later, then these threats could go beyond the region, and they could have grave ramification for the international community. They could even spill over into the European Union and eventually, God forbid, North America as well, as we saw during 9/11. But I would add that kinetic operations need to be emphasized in this region on Pakistan's part as well as the Afghan interim government. There needs to be cooperation between Islamabad and Kabul with international stakeholders such as Washington and Beijing acting as advisory in advisory role, of course, and providing all kind of technical assistance and weaponry, essential weaponry, to counter these threats. But I would also like to add that Pakistan hasn't, called any kind of grand dialogue on counterterrorism yet, which was supposed to occur last month. So that needs to be held as well on part of the Prime Minister and other parties such as the PTI. They need to work together on these issues, and they need to cooperate cohesively in order to counter all kinds of matrix and grave or any kind of cyber threats. Even terrorist groups have the potential to have to conduct cyber operations as well. So that needs to be worked on as well.
Of course, that needs to be worked upon, and the need of the hour is to get together all the different stakeholders in Pakistan in order to evolve a joint strategy. Thank you so very much, Hassan Khan, to have joined us. Let's come to the studios and let's come to Dr. Amina. Dr. Amina, there have been splinter groups as far as the TTP is concerned, but the TTP has become active as of late, especially since it ended its, the non-violent little period that it had as far as its relationship in the region is concerned. What, in your point of view, have been the catalysts for the resurgence of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan?
As just you mentioned, they got number of weapons available to them, and that is actually the mediation force. Actually there was no mediatory force, there was no strong Afghan Kabul government, and they were just puppet of NATO forces. And with the US withdrawal, they became autonomous, and there was actually a type of civil war, and that civil war was won by actually the Taliban. So you see that the dominance of Taliban led to support of TTP. In fact, TTP Afghanistan and TTP Pakistan are no, splinter groups. They are the same from the beginning. So I think that they got this confidence that they can do whatever they like, and they have their own agenda that is different from Afghan Taliban now. But their mannerism, their treatment, their strategy is the same, that is terrorism.
All right, let's talk also about Pakistan and the United States and cooperation between the two countries. The relationship between the two countries has been politicized quite a lot by the previous government. they use a certain strategy in order to defame the US. And for this current government, it has taken quite some time to re-establish contact. And now that contact has begun, how significant, important is it to depoliticize the role of the US in Pakistan by the political parties?
I think that there should be a consensus in all the political parties that we have to do our house in order ourselves, and we don't call anybody for the role of mediation in any case, because when you will give this role to anybody, you accept the supremacy of that power, and then you have to abide by the rules they make for you.
True.
So this is not the way to involve United States in your domestic politics in any way. That should be a clear point of acceptance by all, not only the political parties but all the institution of the state of Pakistan. That is very clear. And we should have relations guided by our national security policy just launched last year, that we want to have sustainable relationship on the basis of geo-economics and cooperation, peoples to people relations. And we are not ready to be the frontline state in any case for any nation of the world. That is actually the clear policy that should be followed by all government institutions, all politicians, all political parties, state and non-state actors.
All right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Amina Mehmood, foreign affairs expert, who have joined us for this important segment, that is US-Pak cooperation in counterterrorism and what needs to be done by Pakistan in order to thwart all the attempts by elements such as the TTP or the ISIK to further themselves into Pakistan. Thank you so very much, ma'am, to have joined us. Let's come to our second segment, and that concerns gender parity or women empowerment. We've got the International Women's Day tomorrow as well, but what strikes us is the statement by Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, who talks about this very issue, that is gender equality, and he says it is 300 years away. He says that women empowerment is slowly and steadily vanishing in front of his own eyes. More in the following report.
Women and their myriad roles, talents are intrinsic for the fabric of every society. In order to eulogize women and their incredible accomplishments in the past and present and inspire young girls to dream big, International Women's Day is celebrated every year on 8th of March. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Digital, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality. This theme is aligned with priority theme for the upcoming 67th session of Commissioner on the Status of Women, which will focus on innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality. Bringing women and other marginalized groups into technology results in more creative solutions and has greater potential for innovations that meet women's need and promote gender equality. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned that global progress on women's rights is vanishing before our eyes, and on the current track, UN Women puts it 300 years away. On the current track, UN Women puts it 300 years away. Islam granted women equal rights and prominent positions in society long before the concepts of human rights and gender equality were codified. Unfortunately, gender bias, gender stereotypes and gender inequality are a reality in every society, and key to equitable world lies in recognizing the problem, address it through policies and programs.
Now, as far as the gender parity is concerned, we see across the world that despite the fact that there are different organizations that are working vehemently for the rights of women in the workplace or at the household, there are still a lot of lacunas that need to be properly handled. That is why the United Nations chief warns about gender equality that is still 300 years away. He said that global progress on women's rights is vanishing before our own eyes. He said the increasingly distant goal of gender equality will take another 3 centuries to achieve. This is a very long time, 3 centuries. It has almost been a century since women's rights are trying to be maintained at different fora in different countries across the world. There are countries where it has been a very important model and it is working properly. There are others where it is struggling. Now, the United Nations Secretary General said this in a General Assembly speech ahead of the International Women's Day that is being held tomorrow. The theme is digital digitally. All that means innovation and technology for gender equality. The use of course, innovation and technology for gender equality is quite important. It is pertinent as well because of the 21st century that is upon us, and everything, whether it be work-related issues or others, you can start your businesses on your phone. So that is why it's important for women to also be at par with men as far as this technology is concerned. Now, women's rights, as far as Antonio Guterres said, are being abused, threatened and violated across the world. He has talked about a number of crises in that regard. He talks about maternal mortality, girls ousted from school, caregivers denied work, children forced into early marriage. These are four very important things that he has talked about, but he has also highlighted the case of Afghanistan, where the Afghan women are still being denied proper fora into the workplace or even education at the university level. Now, he has highlighted the dire conditions, as I said, in the Taliban ruled Afghanistan. He says, and I quote, "Women and girls have been erased from public life there." He has not named any other country apart from Afghanistan, but he did say that there are certain places, certain countries where the women's reproductive rights are being rolled back, and in some countries girls going to school risk kidnapping and assault. There were other countries that were also left unmentioned. The centuries of patriarchy, discrimination and harmful stereotypes have created a huge gender gap in science and technology. This is what Antonio Guterres also said. He cited an example on how, as far as the Nobel Prize is concerned, there were only 3% of winners in different sectors from of course, from the women in the Nobel Peace Prize, whereas the fact remains that women have been on the forefront on the different avenues or in different sectors. And what he was trying to highlight is, of course, collective action worldwide by governments, the civil society and the private sector in order to provide gender responsive education, improving skills training and invest more in bridging the digital gender divide. He said, and I quote, "The patriarchy is fighting back, but so are we." The United Nations, he said, stands with women and girls everywhere. This is very important in the whole context of the fact that a lot of effort is being made since the last few decades across the world to give women their rights at the workplace or at home. But there are different factors that hinder the development of women, despite the fact that they have been extremely important in the development of the familial system or at the workplace. To talk more about this, we've been joined by two guests. My first guest joins us online. She is Zara Naeem, ACCA Global Prizewinner, Pride of Pakistan 21. Zara, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Zara, I'd like to understand, tomorrow is the International Women's Day, but when a person like the United Nations Secretary General calls and talks about gender parity and says that we are still 300 years away, what does that bode as far as women's rights are concerned in the 21st century?
Well, as of now, as a nation, I think we lack in a lot of things regarding the gender equality. There needs to be given a lot of exposure in this regards through social media, perhaps, because that is something that's on the rise, and that is a great way for us to educate the masses. And I feel like, yes, that is true. We are still 300 years away from that because, again, there is a lack of general exposure as to what is the right and the wrong thing.
But at the same time, Zara, we see examples such as yours, who is part of the Pride of Pakistan and an ACCA Global Prize winner. You are an example of women who are rising to the occasion and making their name in patriarchal societies across the world. Despite the pressures that patriarchy puts, despite the pressure that society puts, do you feel women still come up and make themselves known on different sectors?
That is correct. Women in our society, in our country, they're capable of so much. They're very talented. They are full of passion. And if given the right opportunity and the right mediums, they can truly prove themselves to be worthy assets for the country. But then again, it requires perhaps double the effort and double the motivation for them to reach to that level.
All right, Zara, kindly stay online with us. We've got another guest in the studio, Dr. Farah Naz, who's a gender focal person, also an international affairs expert, who joins us here in the studios as well. Thank you very much, Dr. Farah Naz. Good to see you here in the studios. International Women's Day is tomorrow, but Antonio Guterres raises a lot of questions as far as the women's rights are concerned. We are in the 21st century. You yourself are a woman who has made a name for herself at the workplace. Do you see issues in Pakistan and in the different countries that you have gone to as far as women's rights are concerned, as far as women's right to equality at the workplace is concerned?
I think the issues are too many, and I was just wondering that our women, the Pakistani women, they can climb the Mount Everest, they can be 3-star general like General Ligar, they can be good physicians, they could be good aviations, in the aviation sector they can do wonders in engineering. But still, when it comes to equality, are they really equal? I always say no, they are not. Because when we talk about women equality, to me, this concept of women equality or gender equality, this is a bit vague. Because can we be equal to men as women and men? I think no, because this is not like something the Mother Nature has designed us that way.
But they can be given equal opportunities as well.
They can be given equal opportunities, and I always say, whenever as a gender person or a UN female peacekeeper trainer, I always train and talk about that it's not about equality, it's about equal roles. And giving the right person the right role in the society is very important. Unfortunately, in our society, we see, like, I think there's still, like, in this century, in the 21st century, we are talking about patriarchy. So patriarchy do exist.
And patriarchy does not exist only in this region, but it
everywhere.
also exists in the West.
It's everywhere. It's global phenomena. And I think Antonio Guterres, whatever he was referring to, that we are still, if we provide equal status to both genders, men and women, we need 300 more years. I think he was very much right on that, because when we pick up, it's not about Pakistani women being marginalized or not. That I always say they are one of the privileged societies here, because we are surrounded with a support system which the Western women lack in. But if we talk about the challenges, yes, the challenges are too many. And the challenges come from within the society, because we have social norms, cultures, traditions that we have to abide by. Certain roles, when we talk about women representation in different sectors, certain roles are as such where women representation in those roles are not acceptable to the society. Probably the women are capable enough to deliver, but the society is not ready to accept them to be there in those sectors. I often, as I mentioned, that I'm one of the peacekeeper trainers, so I always have an argument with the troops, like let it be the Pakistani troops or the overseas troops, that why Pakistan is not having women and females on the combat operations. And they say that, look, we need some time, and yet we have given ample space. And I say, what do you mean you have given? Women deserve it, and they are there based on their merit. It's not like that you have given them a favor.
Of course.
So women are capable enough to deliver, but at the moment the society only accepts them being a helping hand or
on certain roles,
in the administrative category, rather than accepting them to be on the borders
but
where
in
they
Pakistan,
can fight back.
as you yourself have mentioned, we've got a 3-star general who's there.
Yes,
we've
we have
we've
good
got so many
examples.
women we've had Fatima Jinnah,
Exactly.
who was this Khalid
We
sister,
have-
and was side by side with him as far as the Pakistan movement is concerned.
Benazir Bhutto is a
Of course,
very big
another
example.
very important
Yeah?
example.
Yeah.
That is so true. Kindly stay with us. We continue our discussion as far as this very important issue is concerned, the gender parity or the rights of women. Zara, coming to you. Patriarchy, discrimination, harmful stereotypes have all created a huge gender gap as far as science and technology is concerned. How important is the role of digital technologies, and how important is it for the women to correct or rectify their own roles through their inclusion in on the digital front?
I think, as it was just talked about just moments ago, in our society, often subconsciously or unconsciously, some women also tend to promote toxic masculinity in a way, because that has become a deep-rooted thing in our culture. But as for how we can overcome that and how we can make our way about promoting more equality in terms of at the workplace or socially, social media and digitalization, it plays a huge role. I have plenty of girls, young girls and boys message me saying that this is something they want to pursue, or this is something that they want, and they want some guidance as to how to go about it. And I, holding the little knowledge that I have, I can only help them so much. So I feel that having access to social media or the internet, and that becoming a source for them to maybe get some counseling or mentorship from the right people, and gaining that exposure that they need to explore the opportunities that they want to, that would be a great step. That would be a great initiative, because there's not a lot of people who can get out of the house and get that guidance from the people that they need.
That is so true, Zara, but also, you know, climate change has affected, where it has affected a lot of communities, it has also affected women and their role, especially at the workplace. In Pakistan, we've had the floods last year that have impacted communities across the country, and that includes women as well. How do you feel should be the role of now the government or the different parties or the organizations to bring women at par with the men in countries such as Pakistan, post climate change, post events such as the floods?
I think it's important how there's a minimum wage set for people in our country. Just like in the West, they provide some sort of aid or some sort of funding to those who are actively seeking the jobs. Such an aid should perhaps be introduced in our country for women who are capable, who are very, very talented, which are numerous. There's women at their home doing different sorts of activities regarding clothes and other stuff, and they do not have the outlets for it. And definitely the flood has not made anything better for them. So an aid in any way, or making just work more accessible to people in different rural areas, and opening different avenues for them so that it just becomes accessible for them. That would be great initiative.
Let's hope that initiatives such as these take place. We have seen so many women shine in the limelight in Pakistan on different fronts. You are just one of them. First of all, congratulations again, Zara. And I hope that we'll be getting to talk in much detail in future shows on the role of women in society. But thank you very much to have been here as a guest on this very important topic. Let's come to the studios and let's continue our conversation with Dr. Farah Naz, gender focal person. I've had you more as an international affairs expert, so it's good to have you as a gender focal person, knowing that you work in that arena as well. Pakistan is hosting Women in Islam Conference in New York tomorrow because it is the chair of the OIC Council of Ministers. The theme is Women in Islam, Understanding the Rights and Identity of Women in the Islamic World. Women have always been given their rights in the Islamic world. We know Hazrat Khatija, you know, Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's first wife. She was a businesswoman. She was much older to our last prophet, peace be upon him. And she was the one who sent the marriage proposal to our holy prophet. The fact remains that the women have always been strong as far as Islam is concerned. And Islam has always given the rights to the women. What happened in between?
I think we lost our roots. And this year when I was in Medina, I could see they have established a beautiful museum. In that museum, they are telling the people about Islamic history. And I was shocked to see they had a big tree on which they were highlighting the roles of women, and prominent women who have, you know, served during the Prophet's time or later, or their works, their contribution towards society. They were too many. If I just start, you know, counting them, I think I will lose that. So this means to say that women's roles were not only confined to being, you know, a helping hand in the war situation and go and doing all the bandaging and stuff. They were doing a lot more beyond that. And I think in between, whatever happened is that we tried to be very protective of our women. In that protection, we lost their position in the society. And slowly, steadily, we recognize that they can serve as teachers, being, you know, going into the madaris and providing all the Islamic teachings to the communities over there. Probably that's their potential role. And along with that, they realize that since there is this, protection of women and parda system and, like protecting them from all sorts of environmental issues, so they realized that they need to have female doctors. So this is how the doctors were acceptable in the society. So it was only teachers and doctors. Later on, with time, they realizing, and when women were very persistent in their demand to be with equal footings with the male over there, they were achieving all other categories as well. We denied that women can do something. Even to this date, we deny that women can really do wonders. And I think this is an irony, not only here in Pakistan, but in the rest of the world as well.
No, but when you talk of irony, let's talk about Afghanistan as well.
Yeah.
When our foreign minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab makes an effort to host this Women in Islam conference to bridge gap between perception and reality of the status of women in Islam, we've got a country where women are denied the right to get proper jobs. We are seeing a country which is denying the right to women to get quality education. Why is that? Islam never stopped women.
Islam never stopped women from doing what they can do and they can offer towards the society. Islam believes in equal division of roles, where certain roles are confined to male folks while other roles are confined to women folk. I think the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, they are having plenty and plenty of examples where women have been serving, where women have been delivering several roles. What Taliban and what sort of Sharia they are following is always and always debatable, because I was reading recently that they have not only denied women to have the right to divorce, but they also went a step further, and all those divorces which were taken by the the will of the women in Afghanistan, they said we do not accept them. So where should the women go now? They have moved on in their lives and they have remarried. Now their remarriage is considered invalid and they have to go back to the same person. What is this? This is not what the Quran is telling.
Of course,
this is not what the Sunnah of the Prophet is saying. On the Sunnah and the Quran, they both are very clear on that if a woman wants to or wish to not to live with a person with a reason or without a reason, she has this right. She can go and demand it. Who are they to stop her? And who are they to tell her and guide her that this is not the right way? Who are you to decide for her what is right and what is wrong?
That is so true, and I totally agree with you on that. There are so many things that are prevalent in society, whether it be in the east or in the west, in the north or in the south, gender stereotypes, harmful social norms, culture barriers as far as empowerment of women is concerned. How can one overcome that, whether it be in the global north or in the global south?
Awareness, education, and I think working together. It's through which we can resolve the problem. We had a mention of wages in our conversation. Wages is something, when you go to the Western society, you can find that for female there is one wage and for male there is another wage. What does that mean? The number of hours are almost the same. But they think, and they, like when they were designing such policies where there is this difference between wages, they thought that probably a woman would be going on a maternity leave, but now men are also demanding paternal leave. So it's equal for both of them. Whoever has a child, both parents are going to go on leave. So it's equal thing for them now, because they were also taking that aspect against women folks. Now coming back to our side, we have to go back to our roots. We have to go back to what are religious, because I believe we are an Islamic country where religion is not followed, unfortunately. And
in its true sense.
In its true sense. We claim to be Muslims, but what Islam and the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah tells us, we are not following and going on those directions. If we go, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, has been constantly demanding that a girl child needs to be educated. First thing first. And she needs to have access to all those information that she requires in her life. Unfortunately, the society is shying away, is not letting a girl child know that what she needs to know at what time. She knows certain information when she is gone of that age, which is of no use for them. So we have to go back, study all these books that are given to us through our religious understanding, and then think, because if we consider ourselves a Muslim society, we have to go back to that. That's the only way.
All right, one last question. Women are breaking new grounds as far as different fields. You yourself are one such woman, acting as agents of change. We've also have gatherings of women that a lot of people known as Aurat March. We are going to have one this year as well. They have made certain demands, which includes end of patriarchal violence, increased representation of women at all levels of decision making concerning climate change, and increased education for health and education for women. How important are these demands?
These demands are very important, but are they all doable? Ending patriarchy is, I think, in itself a too much big demand. If it was possible, probably the West would have done it long ago, but they are still struggling with that. Now, coming over, giving equal status to men and women, this General Secretary himself is saying we need 300 more years.
300 more years.
So these are not doable stuff. And like, speaking of where women can do and where they can deliver, like, speaking of the peacekeepers, Pakistan is the only country who is contributing 15% of the female representation in the United Nations missions. So Pakistan did that, it managed it, but it was a huge challenge for them, keeping in mind the social and the societal stereotypes and biases associated to it. A woman leaving her family behind, her children, her husband behind, and going to a different country which is a conflict-ridden place, it's a huge challenge for her. Learning from their experiences, what they go, how their families are responding back, the issues that prevail there, the health-related issues, their physical and mental-related issues,
and all
there are
need
too
to
many.
be catered to, and they need to be given not only due representation but due respect. I think that is very important. Thank you so very much, Dr. Farah Naz, gender focal person, foreign affairs expert, to have joined us in the studios to talk about that. I hope we'll get to hear more of you on women empowerment in the coming days as well. Thank you so very much, Dr. Farah Naz. Let's come to our last two stories. The first concerns Palestine. There have been two important statements that have come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the state of Palestine. The first concerns the warning of dangers of calls launched by the extremist Jewish organizations to carry out massive incursions into the holy Masjid al-Aqsa in conjunction with the so-called Eid on Tuesday and Wednesday, that is the 7th and the 8th of March. And of course, the state of Palestine is extremely worried and concerned about this. It calls for international American intervention to stop them before it is too late. Its second statement calls on the international community to take immediate concrete measures to hold Israeli officials accountable for their crimes and continual incitement and threats to commit crimes against the Palestinian people. And this has been going on since quite some time. We are seeing the different forms of brutalities that have been perpetrated or are being perpetrated on the Palestinian people. We here are raising our voices as much as we can. I hope the world listens one day and acts accordingly. Our last story concerns Cox's Bazar and thousands of Rohingya refugees that have been left homeless after a huge fire in Bangladesh's camp in Cox's Bazar. More than 12,000 Rohingya Muslims who are refugees there have been left homeless due to a fire that swept through a camp in Cox's Bazar in southeastern Bangladesh. This was as per an official statement of the United Nations. More than 2,000 shelters and over 90 facilities, including hospitals and learning centers, have been destroyed in Sunday's blaze. Now, as we know, there are around 1 million or more Rohingya refugees that live in different camps in Cox's Bazar, which fled a military crackdown in Myanmar in 2017. We wish some kind of a solution comes for these people at the earliest, because already they are displaced from their country of origin. Let's hope in Bangladesh, the Bangladeshi government and the United Nations with the donor countries comes to their aid at the earliest. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news stories, segments that pertain to us, you in Pakistan. Have a wonderful evening ahead and see you tomorrow. Allah Hafiz.